Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim, and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. The Turkish government has finally brought an end to the PKK terror group after decades of bloodshed, a moment which President Erdogan calls historic. Today, we'll examine what this means for peace, politics, and the region's future. But the challenges don't stop at home. From Turkey's counter-terrorism diplomacy in Pakistan to the 30th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide, we'll discuss what lessons apply today, especially in Gaza, where UN experts warn of another unfolding atrocity. On today's episode, I'm joined by Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, and Dr. Shuay Nilhan Açıkalın from the Hacı Bayram Veli University in Ankara.
Türkiye is witnessing a pivotal moment in its fight against terrorism as efforts to build a terror-free Türkiye gain traction following a rare public call from within the outlawed PKK terrorist organization to abandon its decades-long armed campaign. In a recently published video released by a news outlet affiliated with the group, PKK's jailed ringleader announced the end of the armed struggle, instead urging a transition toward democratic political engagement under the rule of law. The PKK, which is designated a terrorist organization by Turkey, the United States, and the European Union, has been responsible for the deaths of more than 40,000 people since it launched its bloody terrorism in 1984. The declaration comes after the group reportedly decided in May to disband, following earlier internal discussions. In the message, the group acknowledged that its separatist goals had failed and claimed that its existence had been acknowledged, signaling a readiness to disarm and reintegrate under legal democratic processes. Turkish authorities have reiterated that there can be no tolerance for terrorism, and that any transition must be complete, unconditional, and under the framework of Turkish law. The government's terror-free Türkiye initiative is now moving into a critical new phase. This broad-based strategy aims to end terrorism permanently, heal the wounds of past violence, and promote national unity and development. The initiative is centered on promoting dialogue, disarmament, and comprehensive reforms while strengthening Turkey's legal and security framework. It includes efforts to expand economic opportunities in formerly conflict-affected areas, foster political inclusiveness, and rebuild trust across all sectors of society. As part of the process, terrorists are expected to begin surrendering their weapons in northern Iraq's Sulaymaniyah province, marking a significant step in the demobilization process. The government has made clear that while it supports peaceful resolutions, it remains fully committed to protecting its citizens from terrorism and will not allow any threats to national sovereignty or public safety. The Terror-Free Türkiye initiative is seen as a strategic investment in the country's long-term stability, security, and prosperity, one that seeks to replace violence with opportunity and division with unity. If successful, the initiative could bring closure to one of Turkey's most painful chapters and usher in a new era of hope and resilience for generations to come.
Welcome back to the program. Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Dr. Mehmet, let's start with the PKK's dissolution and disarmament. Yesterday, there was a message by the jailed ringleader, Abdullah Öcalan. He issued a message saying that I believe in the power of politics and social peace, not weapons. Let's start with the overview, Mehmet. What are we going to expect? And tomorrow, they're going to lay down their arms finally. So how are you looking at the entire developments?
Well, Omar, of course, it is a very historic moment for not just Turkey and the Turkish society and Turkish state, but it's also a very historic moment for the region itself. But before I answer your question, I would like to mention that we lost 12 soldiers to an unfortunate incident over the weekend, and I would like to send my condolences to the nation and to the families of the fallen soldiers and wish Allah's mercy upon them. 12 is not just a number, it's 12 lives, 12 soldiers, 12 heroes that we lost as part of the ongoing operations in northern Iraq. They were actually in an effort to rescue one of the fallen soldiers from 2022 in a cave, and this unfortunate incident happened. To answer your question, just to draw an overview about what is taking place. As you know, in late last year, MHP leader Devlet Bahçeli made a call about terror-free initiative, and then it followed with the support of Mr. Erdogan, and then the involved parties, DEM party actors, met with PKK leader Öcalan at İmralı. And since then, the talks have been going back and forth to bring this idea about a terror-free initiative, about a terror-free Türkiye, about a peaceful solution to this terror problem that has been keeping Türkiye busy, keeping Türkiye's agenda busy, taking lives for the past 4 decades. Of course, now we see this idea actually materializing and turning into something more substantial with Öcalan. This is his second call, actually, where he said basically, the aim of establishing a sovereign state through PKK terrorism, now they have abandoned that and they are no longer seeking that. The second is that they have dismantled PKK terrorist organization, and also they are saying that they will lay down arms. Of course, as historic as it is, as significant as this process is, it is also very fragile. As the PKK in the previous shows we've mentioned, that the PKK is not a very homogeneous or only single actor or single leader entity.
There are multiple factions of the PKK.
There's multiple factions. There's multiple countries that are involved actually in the PKK's organization. We see them in Iran. We see them in northern Iraq. They are acting, although they're organically linked with the PKK, they're acting under a different name of YPG in northern Syria. There is also the European branch or European establishment of the PKK terrorist organization in Europe. They conduct very effective fundraising for the terrorist group.
Especially in Germany and Sweden, right?
Especially in Germany and Sweden, but many European capitals have, throughout the past 4 decades, they have actually acted as a safe haven for the members of the terrorist group. Nevertheless, I think there is different power groups within the PKK that will try to maximize their own interests within the group as the group is dismantling. What will happen to that process on the PKK side? This is something that time will show. But there will be also, I think, offshoots of the PKK where some of the smaller groups, some of the fractions, they may try to sabotage this momentum, sabotage this process, and become an instrument, basically, in the hands of foreign intelligence groups that will like to see this process not go forward. Nevertheless, Türkiye has been very careful. Türkiye has been very cautious in moving forward with this process. But at the same time, they try to make sure that this is not something that will be lingering for a very long time. This is not something that will be taking, such a long time that it will be vulnerable to some provocations. So there is this cautious, there's this very cautious handling of the process by the Turkish side. And also in northern Syria, yesterday there was a very important meeting between Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, the U.S. Syria envoy Tom Barak, and also the YPG leader in Syria. So how this will, whether they will try to drag their foot in dismantling the YPG and integrating into northern Syria, will also have an impact on the terror-free initiative that Turkey is carrying out for its own security, its own safety, its own social stability, and for the region's future as a peaceful initiative that would like to see peace not only within Turkey but also along its southern border, and that will have a very positive impact on the region.
Mehmet, I want to ask you another question. Why now? Because Öcalan said, we want social peace, not weapons. Don't you believe that this could have happened a few years ago? Why after 40 years and, the deaths of 40,000 innocent civilians. Abdullah Öcalan could have made this call before as well. So why has it happened right now?
Well, in my personal opinion, I think this is a lot to do with the success of Turkish operations, counterterrorism operations against the PKK within Turkey, within Turkish borders, but also cross-border operations in northern Iraq and northern Syria as well. They have, in my opinion, they see that that has no end in fighting the Turkish state, I think it's a moment that they have realized that they can't win this war against the Turkish state. I think it has also a lot to do with the political stability in Turkey and the political will that is put behind this process especially by the People's Alliance partners, the MHP, as well as the AK Party leadership, Mr. Erdogan's leadership. But at the same time, it has a lot to do with the fact that Turkey has gained a lot of experience when it comes to counterterrorism, how to deal with the PKK, how to deal with the PKK as an entity that causes instability in the region, and Turkey's growing leadership and growing strength in the region. Also, Turkey's experience with the previous processes that failed when it comes to bringing a peaceful solution to this conflict. I think timing is, of course, very important, but also at the same time, when we talk about the domestic dynamics, that's one thing. But Turkey and the Turkish state mindset realize that, I think, the geopolitical developments in our region, especially what Israel's efforts to make instability a permanent thing in the region, Israel's expansionist policies and other factors related to this conflict and these dynamics made Turkey to take a preemptive step, not a preemptive strike, but preemptive step that will establish peace before it becomes too late.
Mehmet, now it's not just about Turkey, it's about Syria as well, it's about Iraq as well. We've seen in the past few months how the SDF has started integrating into the Syrian government forces, and then Turkey has dealt a major blow to the PKK in northern Iraq. We've seen over the past few months in multiple counterterrorism operations. Now, Mehmet, how important is the dissolution of the PKK terror group, not just for Turkey, but for the entire region?
Well, as I just said, Omar, PKK is not an entity that only targets Turkish security and sovereignty and territorial integrity, but they had aimed before, during the Assad regime, when during the civil war in Syria, they had aimed to establish an autonomous region, basically, along Turkey's border. That would have been a terror corridor that will be, literally along Turkey's southern border, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, that also is a threat to Syria's territorial integrity. In Iraq, PKK is a cause of instability. The reason why Turkey suffered for many years in its relations with Iraq had a lot to do with the presence of the PKK in northern Iraq. And now, in terms of establishing, for example, this development corridor between Turkey and Iraq, which will be, I think, very important for prosperity of the region and cooperation, trade relations in the region. This PKK, with PKK presence in northern Iraq, it's impossible to establish such projects that will contribute to well-being of every citizen or every person and every individual in this region. Terrorist groups, I think, for a very long time were differentiated by many actors involved in the region from outside, or people in the region, or the governments in the region. PKK is no different than Daesh, right? I think the treating different groups differently served nobody's interest. Now they have come to a realization that, especially with Iraq coming on the same page with regards to PKK on Turkey's arguments, they will see that elimination of PKK from this region, bring an end to this conflict that is cross-border or transboundary issue, will bring only peace and stability to the region. At least it will eliminate the instability or the problems that the PKK brought. When it comes to northern Syria, again, there is a rebuilding of a state, basically, after the 14 years of a war and literally destroyed a destroyed country, PKK or YPG would have tried to exploit that moment and gain its own political autonomy or military autonomy, or at least create its own autonomous power within Syria. But the Syrian government said, we will not allow that. But more importantly, Turkey said, this is not something that I will accept or I will agree with along my borders, as it has been causing a conflict or posing a threat to my citizens and to my sovereignty. So they have the fact that now Syria and Turkey are along the same page. The fact that one of the very important actors in the region, the United States, is on the same page when it comes to Syria's future and Syria's unified composition or Syria's territorial integrity. I think this will also United States, Turkey, and Syria being on the same page when it comes to YPG's future. This will also be important for the elimination of the group. Nevertheless, their integration is still hasn't materialized. They would like to detach themselves from the process that is taking place between Turkey and the PKK, but Turkey knows very well that there's no difference between the YPG and the PKK, as they are part of the same umbrella group. So I think that pressure will be there if that integration doesn't happen into Syrian government, Syrian administration, and if they don't lay down arms. I think Turkey is very clear on their position on how they will deal with the YPG in northern Syria as well. And they will not refrain from putting boots on the ground and dealing with the matter through hard power rather than this integration process between the SDF or YPG and the Syrian administration.
Mehmet, tell me about the American influence, because over the past few years, we've seen President Erdogan has said that the United States cannot use one terror group to fight another terror group. What was that all about, and how influential was the United States in fighting terrorism in the region? Or was it not fighting terrorism in the region and only using this region for its personal gains?
Well, I mean, of course, we know that the U.S. presence in many different parts of the world is only to maximize its own interests. It has nothing to do with well-being of citizens, and it had nothing to do with the well-being of citizens in Afghanistan, in Iraq. It wasn't in Vietnam for the well-being of the Vietnamese at the time. It is not trying to save Taiwan from China because it cares about the Taiwanese. But nevertheless, this is a different topic. But I think when it comes to Syria, the YPG received billions, perhaps, or millions of dollars in military support, military equipment, tactical support, training, and as well as political support when it comes to YPG. They separated YPG from the PKK and they armed it to fight against Daesh. So basically, they ignored the fact that the PKK is listed as a terrorist group by the United States state as a foreign terrorist organization. And they ignored the organic links, turned a blind eye knowingly to YPG, in the fact that they are the same group basically. One of the figures in the United States said, we can just bring a different acronym and we will act as if they are different groups. And this is how they came about with the SDF, basically. But Turkey criticized that for a very long time. They said that you cannot fight a terror establishment, which they said Daesh at the time, with arming another terror group. There's no one my terror group is better than yours type of thing. Now, when it comes to the effectiveness of that, it only caused social instability and demographic changes and many other atrocities within Syria, but also I think it secured some of the U.S., of course, interests when it comes to oil in northeastern Syria. However, when it comes to fight against Daesh effectively, Turkey is the only country that actually put boots on the ground and had cross-border operations and supported Syria's territorial integrity against these different terrorist groups. When it comes to why Turkey had to do that, because there were threats to its sovereignty from the southern border, and it also received no support fighting against Daesh or the PKK terrorist group from its Western allies. So it had to basically do its own job without support of any of its traditional Western allies. And this is why, I mean, Turkey takes this very serious for its sovereignty, for the future of its country, as it sees this as an existential threat, basically. The presence of the YPG or the PKK or any other terrorist group, of course, along its borders.
Mehmet, thank you for that analysis. We'll be right back with you.
Thank you.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has reaffirmed his vision of a peaceful and stable Turkey as the nation enters a key phase in its fight against terrorism.
Vatanımız uğrunda canlarını feda etmiş tüm şehitlerimizi de rahmetle anıyor, gazilerimize şükranlarımı sunuyorum.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan participated in the AK Party group meeting in the capital Ankara on Wednesday.
Terörsüz Türkiye çalışmalarının hiçbir yerinde şehitlerimizin hatırasına gölge düşürecek, onların ruhunu incitecek bir adım yoktur ve olamaz.
The Turkish president's remarks come amid growing momentum for Turkey's Terror-Free Turkey initiative, which aims to end decades of armed conflict through a strategy centered on disarmament, democratic engagement, and national solidarity.
Önce terörsüz Türkiye, ardından terörsüz bölge hedefimize ulaşarak şehitlerimizin ruhlarını şad edecek, onların fedakarlıklarının boşa gitmediğini dost düşman herkese göstereceğiz.
The Terror-Free initiative represents not just the end of conflict, but the beginning of a new chapter in Turkey's history, one that is characterized by peace, security, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow for all its people.
Şehitlerimizin uğruna can verdiği değerlerin rehberliğinde Türkiye'yi inşallah yarım asırlık bir musibetten kurtarıyor, ülkemizin ayağına vurulmuş bu kanlı prangayı tamamen söküp atıyoruz.
He warned against potential sabotage attempts by shady and corrupt circles, calling for vigilance and unity to ensure that the historic opportunity for lasting peace and stability is not derailed.
Önümüzdeki günlerde olumlu haberlerin alınacağı bir evreye giriyoruz. Bu hayırlı sürecin herhangi bir yol kazası yaşanmadan, karanlık ve kirli mahfiller tarafından sabote edilmesine fırsat vermeden mümkün olan en kısa sürede başarıyla neticelenmesini temenni ediyoruz.
Welcome back to the program. Now let's take a look at the front page of Daily Sabah. Mehmet, how we were talking about the region being terror-free, with the PKK gone, with other regional terror groups gone, from Syria, from northern Iraq. This is exactly what the president mentioned as well. Tell us more about that, Mehmet.
Well, Mr. Erdogan yesterday was talking at the parliament to his AK Party members. He was addressing his parliamentary group. And one thing that he highlighted was very important. The fact, and when we were just talking about that, of course, the fact that this terror-free initiative, Terror-Free Türkiye initiative, is not going to only bring peace to Turkey, but it is something that we will see trickle-down effects in the entire region. And I think this is an important moment that needs to be highlighted and supported at the same time. But all actors in Turkey, but in addition to that, all actors in the region. I think Iraq has a very important role to play in this. Syria has a very important role to play in this. The United States, as an involved actor from outside in Syria, it has a very important homework to do when it comes to making sure that YPG is eliminated, and they should see that for Syria's stability and also the region's stability. In addition, I think as importantly, it has a lot, it means a lot for Iran as well, as PEJAK, the YPG, the PKK offshoot, is also operative in Iran. Nevertheless, I think this is going to set up a very good momentum for a prosperous and stable region if it actually materializes and we see tangible results coming out of this. And at the end, all the countries will benefit from that, not just only Turkey.
Mehmet, just very shortly, tomorrow in the Iraqi city of Suleimaniye, the PKK is going to be disarmed, it's going to lay down its arms, and it will dissolve as well eventually. What are you thinking about that?
Well, of course, this is the PKK disarmament or laying down arms will not come in just, whole batch will not be together. So there will be small, I think, groups laying down arms tomorrow. in Iraq's Suleimania. This is a very, I think, symbolic in one sense. At the same time, the terrorist group is trying to also propagate, make its own positive propagation to its members, to show that, you know, this wasn't just a loss, basically. But I mentioned my personal opinion, you know, they had nowhere to go, basically, anymore. So they had to come to an agreement with Türkiye. Nevertheless, I think it's important for symbolically, and we will see the continuation of that. This is a process. This is not something that will take from, you know, will take a rushed, this is not a rushed project. It will take time, but it shouldn't take long, as we saw in previous examples, for example, in IRA or ETA in European countries, the laying down of arms by those groups in Europe. So it shouldn't be rushed, but it shouldn't also linger too much when it comes to these groups laying down their arms within the PKK. I think it's very fragile. For that reason, it needs to be handled very carefully, but it also should be very swift so that the vulnerability of the process is minimized.
Mehmet, thank you for that analysis. We'll continue to monitor this headline and the developments related to this.
Thank you.
Now let's take a look at this news report, and we'll be right back.
3 decades after their fathers, brothers, husbands and sons perished in the bloodiest episode of the Bosnian War, female survivors of Srebrenica find some solace in having been able to unearth their loved ones' remains from faraway mass graves and return them to their final resting place, the solitary graves of a local memorial cemetery. The Srebrenica genocide was the bloody massacre of Bosnia's 1992-95 war. It came after the breakup of Yugoslavia unleashed nationalist passions and territorial ambitions that set Bosnian Serbs against the country's 2 other main ethnic populations, Croats and Bosniaks.
Smiraj sam našla tu, da sam ja blizu mojih I kad sam u svojoj kući ja često, pogotovo pred akšam, zamišljam, možda su negdje otišli da rade pa će doći će. I ta pomisao da će oni doći, da sam ja tu blizu njih, da i to me drži, ne bi mogla da se udaljim od ovog mjesta, nema za mene ljepote koja bi mogla biti ravna ovom što sam ovdje.
On July 11, 1995, Serbs overran Srebrenica, which was a UN-protected safe area at the time. They separated at least 8,000 Bosniak men and boys from their wives, mothers, and sisters and slaughtered them. Those who tried to escape were chased through the woods and over the mountains around the ill-fated town. Women and children were packed onto buses and expelled from the town. The executioners tried to erase their victims from existence, plowing their bodies into hastily made mass graves which they later dug up with bulldozers and scattered among other burial sites to hide the evidence of the crime. But as soon as the genocide was over, women vowed to find the remains of their loved ones, bring them back to their town and give them a proper burial.
Napisali smo istoriju bijelim nišanima. To je naš uspjeh. Pored naše boli, svaka od nas zadrhtio je srce kad pomene svog sina, svog muža, svog brata, svoj narod, svoj grad. Ali ne damo da se zaboravi.
Često stavim na sto da evociram uspomene, da oživim to što sam imala, a 30 godina od 95. pa do danas svakodnevnica je negdje borba s tim što smo preživjeli i nijedan dan mi ne možemo imati potpuno neki opuštajući.
Body parts are still being found in death pits around Srebrenica and identified through DNA analysis. So far, the remains of more than 6,700 people have been found in several different mass graves and reburied at the memorial cemetery inaugurated in Srebrenica.
Sretna majka bila, 3 sina rodila, odhranila, školovala. Danas okreći se oko sebe, nemam nigdje nikoga.
Almost 90% of those reported missing from the fall of Srebrenica have been accounted for through their mortal remains exhumed from hundreds of mass graves scattered around the eastern town, until today. 2 UN courts declared the Srebrenica carnage as a genocide.
Pa nema noći ni dana, legnem uveče u 2, u 3 sata se probudim, mislim kako su oni poginuli, da li su gladni bili, da li su ženi, znam da jesu.
Summers in Srebrenica are difficult, as July 11, the anniversary of the day the genocide began in 1995, approaches.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now from the Turkish capital is Dr. Shuay Nilhan Açıkal, and she is a professor at the Hacı Bayramveli University. Dr. Shuay, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Umar.
Dr. Shuay, we've been talking about the PKK, how they're going to dissolve, how they're going to disarm. But today I have a separate thing for you, and we're going to discuss the Srebrenica genocide. Shuay, what are you thinking about the reconciliation efforts for this year? This is the 30th anniversary, which is going to be marked tomorrow. What are your views on it?
Thank you very much, Umar. Unfortunately, Srebrenica genocide is one of the darkest moments in the 21st century world history. Yes, we are commemorating the 30th anniversary, but at the same time, it's a very, how can I say, still pitiful times, because as you all know that the Court of the Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia completed some legal cases, but still for the Mladic or Radovan, but still the feel of the sense of the justice has been very lack. In this respect, it can be also said that the last year United Nations marked this day as a commemorate day. It's created another and a new, a fresh page for looking forward to justice and the compensations for the victim of this genocide. And as you also mentioned that right now it is the 30th anniversary, but at the same time still there are some the mass graves have been still found in the different parts of the area. And it still shows that there are a lack of not only the feeling of justice, but at the same time, legally, justice is still ongoing case for the both the Mladic and the other people who involved this genocide.
Shuay, another genocide is happening before our eyes. It's being live streamed across the globe in the occupied Gaza Strip, where Israeli forces have been killing women and children and everyone that they can count. So, what are you thinking about this genocide at this point in time? Because we've also seen how international organizations have failed to protect the Palestinians. What are your views at about the current developments that we've been seeing in the occupied Gaza Strip?
Thank you very much. I think it is one of the worst things that we can remember for the Srebrenica genocide is not only the genocide itself, but the silence of the United Nations peacekeeping forces over there. And it was the painful and the movement for the United Nations peacekeeping since then. But at the same time, now we are witnessing in 2025 the same in Gaza, and we saw that even in the 12th round, United Nations can barely manage to get the ceasefire decision in the United Nations in general sessions. And at the same time, once more, within the 30 years, we saw the inefficiencies of the international organizations. And unfortunately, there's a clear lack of the international community and their clear standing against the genocide for the humanity, but especially for the Palestinians in Gaza.
Mehmet, I want to ask you a question about what's happening in the occupied Gaza Strip. Now, the Israeli forces and the Israeli government have been asking Palestinians to move to humanitarian corridors. That's what they've termed them, humanitarian corridors, or safe areas. Now, Mehmet, I don't think that these are safe areas or humanitarian corridors. These are basically concentration camps where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are going to go. They're going to be there. And then most probably, as we've seen in the past, they will be bombed, they will be attacked. What do you think about these developments, Mehmet, and also the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? What are your views on that?
Well, Omar, just to add a quick comment to what Shuay just said and about Srebrenica genocide, I would like to, of course, once again offer our condolences to the fallen martyrs of that genocide. Nevertheless, I think what came after that also hasn't really established a stable region when it comes to the Bosnia and how it is functioning right now. It hasn't brought really a well-grounded, well-founded peace to Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. So we see that there's that conflict still, although of course it's not an armed conflict anymore, it is a political conflict still, that is very vulnerable for any exploitation that could take place in that region. So that's just a two cent on that. When it comes to, as you mentioned, we are commemorating the Srebrenica genocide, but at the same time, another genocide is unfolding today. This shows that the international community hasn't done its part to prevent any genocide from taking place once again. We said, the international community said never again after the Holocaust, but we've seen other genocides taking place worse than what took place perhaps in the Holocaust, and we see that unfolding live stream in Gaza right now. When it comes to your question, not to make it any longer, but I think the Israeli military, Israeli government reorganizes its bombing areas. They say that they're safe areas. For me, they just shuffle around where to bomb next, where to target next, where they can actually get more people with their shots. This is why they are reorganizing or making calls to reorganize Palestinians from one area to the other. I don't see any point beyond that, and I'm saying this specifically because we've seen that the moment they move Palestinians from or they say that the Palestinians should move from one area to the other, they go ahead and target that. Even when it comes to the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, which is very controversial and has nothing to do with the aid, we see that they just basically use this to reorganize Palestinians to make their attacks more effective. This is how I see it. This has nothing to do with the humanitarian efforts, and it has been condemned widely by international human rights organizations, by the NGOs, by many of the European countries even, that this does not function, it does not serve the purpose for humanitarian reasons. So I think for Israel, the only solution to this conflict is to eliminate all the Palestinians from their homes, from their lands, and to expand their occupation and their, this instability to the wider region.
Shwai, what do you think about the meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump? They have met twice in the space of a few days, and this was a very important meeting for Netanyahu because he also nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. And then they explicitly discussed how to remove Gazans from the occupied Gaza Strip. So how are you analyzing this meeting between the two leaders?
Umar, thank you. I think it's just be remind that it is the third meeting since the Trump get the presidential election. So it shows that every time when Netanyahu visit the White House, mainly he made a pressure on the Trump regarding the Gaza issue, because there was an expectancy to have the ceasefire that the Trump already mentioned in the few days before his visit to White House. But since then there is no improvement or progress in this ceasefire. But at the same time, there's another, how can I say, the worst plan we can ever heard about the Gaza. When we first visit the Netanyahu and Trump came up with the holiday resort idea. So in this respect, it can be seen that also the domestic politics relations in terms of the Trump and the Netanyahu, because we all know that the Trump will have a budget sessions in soon. And in this respect, there are some other positions that has been together evaluated by the foreign policy and the domestic politics in the American policy. So in this respect, finally, I can say that in Gaza, unfortunately, there is no light for the ceasefire. But of course, the upcoming days will show that how there will be another, at least a ceasefire negotiation between the sides. And in this way, the Qatar and the Turkey, as well as some other regional countries, playing a key role to facilitate. But of course, the Netanyahu and his political position in Israel is also quite controversial in last month. So we will see how the different dynamics will affect the situation in Gaza.
Shwai, you were talking about facilitation. We've seen Qatar and Egypt engaging in negotiations to end this war. And, Trump also has mentioned in the past few days that Gaza's, Israel's Arab neighbors should be responsible for, displaced Palestinians. Do you think that Arab countries in the Middle East will be willing to take in Palestinians? Do you think that's going to happen? Or do you think that they're going to help them survive this war or help them relocate themselves, or displaced, as I should call it?
Well, I don't think that they will willingness or they will participate that kind of the unacceptable plan, because if there will be that kind of plan, it will be a kind of a milestone for the region, and it will have a serious consequences for everyone, not only for the Israel or Palestinians, but also for the region dynamics. And I think that kind of the plans that come up by the Netanyahu is not the new. If you look over the past few years, even without any conflict, Netanyahu and the Israeli government try to make up this kind of the plan, and they try to keep the Qatar or at least the Egypt to have this plan realized, and it makes created a different crisis between the regional actors. And of course, there should be a kind of the expectation from the neighboring countries of the Palestine should be much more involved in the negotiations for the ceasefire.
Dr. Shwai Nilhan Achikalan, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure listening to your analysis.
Thank you, Umar.
Dr. Mehmet, thank you to you as well for being a part of our episode again.
Thank you, Umar.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.